Hello there, and welcome to Really Cool Excel. Today I'm going to explain how to automatically link data from one place in a worksheet to another. These links could be to cells in the same worksheet, in a different worksheet, or even in a different workbook. There are lots of reasons you might want to do this, but principally it's all about efficiency. Let's look at an example which will demonstrate the point quite clearly. This worksheet contains data relating to the 5 regions listed in column A. As the worksheet develops and you need to record more data, you might decide to repeat the region names in cells A10 to A14 here. You could easily copy the names by selecting them, then put the mouse here. The pointer changes to a white arrow with a 4-pointed cross. Then hold down the Control key, the mouse pointer changes again, this time to a white arrow with a plus, which means instead of moving the data, you'll copy it. Still holding the Control key, drag the data to the new location and lift your finger off the mouse first. This is the easiest way to copy data in Excel. It's a bit tricky till you get used to it, but it's a technique well worth mastering. Now let's imagine your boss looks at this worksheet and says, we should rename all the regions to say Northern instead of North, Southern instead of South, and so on. Well, it's the sort of thing a boss would say, isn't it? Anyway, because you copied the data, you'll have to make these changes in 2 places, or even more, depending on how much data you have. Copying data in these circumstances is therefore inefficient, partly because of the typing involved, but also, what if you forget to make a change somewhere? Linking the data solves both these problems. Here's how to do it, but let's get rid of this first. Delete. Click in A10, then type the simplest of formulas equals A2, and click the tick. North appears in A10, but if you check out the formula bar, you'll see that A10 doesn't have North in it. It has a link to A2. Now use autofill to replicate the formula from A10 down to A14. Well, look at that. Relative cell referencing, as explained in earlier lessons, means if A10 equals A2, then A11 will equal A3, and so on. Now along comes your boss with her very helpful suggestion to change the region names. Now it's easy. Change A2 to Northern, and because of the link, A10 changes too. If you change anything in the source cells, the linked cells will also change automatically. So it's much more efficient, and you have a happy boss. Result. The main learning point here is don't copy cells if you can link them instead. Now let's see how to link cells that are in different worksheets. The principle is very much the same. This sheet will contain only the summary information from the first sheet, so we don't need all the source data, just the totals. We'll put them in row 3. So, first thing to do is click in A3. Again, the link is made using a formula, so equals. Then the next step is to navigate to the cell you want to link to. Click the tab for the source data sheet because that's where it is. And before we move on, have a look at the formula bar, particularly the syntax or code. It says equals, open quote, the name of the sheet, which is source data, close quote, then an exclamation mark. So what's all that about? Well, the exclamation mark is a piece of Excel code that simply identifies this as a worksheet name. And the quotes only appear if your sheet name has a space in it. I'll show you. I'll quit out of here by hitting the Escape key, then I'll edit the space out of the sheet name. Start off the formula again, equals, click the sheet name, and as you can see, there aren't any quotes this time. Now click on the cell in source data you want to link to, A7, and take another look at the formula bar. This shows that the link will be to A7 on the sheet named source data. Finally, as always, click the tick to finish off. Automatically, Excel takes you back to the starting point on the summary data sheet, which now says totals because it's linked to A7 in source data. To prove it's worked, I'll change the source data cell to read totals, plural, in capitals. Go back to the other sheet, and there we go. The link between the two sheets means it's changed automatically. Now we need to link these cells to the 5 figures in source data. Autofill from A3 will work here too. Now we have the totals linked to here from the source data sheet. Let's check it works. Back to source data, change this figure in B2 to read 21. The total changes to 35, and it changes in summary data too. So there you have it. Cells in one sheet linked to cells in a different sheet. And quite straightforward, yes? Good. Finally, linking across workbooks. Again, the principle is the same, but one word of warning. This will only work if the source workbook and the linked workbook are in the same file location. That could be on the same PC or accessible via the same server. If you have the source workbook on your PC and I have the linked workbook on mine, and we're not connected in any way, it cannot work. But in this case, they are in the same place, so we follow the same lines as before. First, make sure both workbooks are open. In the linked workbook, click where you want the totals to be. Just use A3 again for continuity. Type equals, navigate to the source workbook and click the source data tab. Look again at the formula. It's similar to what we had earlier with one extra piece of code. The workbook name source workbook in square brackets, or parentheses if you're a bit posh. Then click A7. Now, if you've completed the lesson called Absolute Cell Referencing, you'll recognize these dollar signs. If you've come straight in at this point, you can pick up the earlier lessons from the website. The dollar signs in a cell reference mean that this cell will be fixed, or constant, meaning we won't be able to autofill to replicate the formula across the row. As you saw earlier, this will be our next step, so we need to edit these dollar signs out. Finally, click the tick. Then, to complete the row, autofill across, and these cells in the link workbook are connected to their equivalents in the source workbook. One final test, just to prove it. Back to source data, change B2 to read 101. The total changes to 115. Switch back to the linked workbook, and there you go. Success. As you can see, linking across workbooks is only slightly more complicated than linking across worksheets. But there's one thing worth pointing out. If you or someone else moves one of the linked files, the link will be broken. And remember, other people, IT maybe, they won't know your files are linked, so it's just something to be aware of. So before I finish, 2 things to remember, I guess. First, make sure both workbooks are filed in the same location, and second, edit out any dollar signs. We don't want any absolute references when we are linking data in these circumstances. There will be other times when we do want absolute references, but that's a story for another day. I'll leave you now to go off and experiment, and if you'd like more practice, download the associated Excel file from the website. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next time.